Hi guys, it's Kelly here and I'm back with another video. In today's video we are going to be creating with some Crafty Meraki products. These are from their newest release and it is some stencils and dies. There's no stamp set. I know, isn't it wild? But I think they came out super cute. Before we go much further into the video, I do just want to say that Crafty Meraki is having a 20% off sale of all of their product line. So if it's a Crafty Meraki product, these are. You can get them at 20% off through the holiday weekend. And there's also a ton of other sales going on, like really, really great ones. And I will link my craft sales page below. If you want to check out those sales, saves you money and helps support me so I can make content for you. And yeah, so that's it. So this is the I think it's Whimsy Lavender. And when I am doing, especially when there's no stamps, when there's just a stencil, I like to really build up my colors. And so I started with a light pink and then I went to a pinkish purple, and this is all on one layer of stencil. My stencil's being held in place by my sticky mat from my Alt New stamp wheel, PPS. And then I like to go over it twice because I like a really good blend that has a lot of color down. And so even though that this is my base layer, I put on 3 colors already and I did them twice. But this is just really going to help us create a lot of depth and dimension without having to go in with another coloring medium. Not that you can't. I think that that would be great to do, like colored pencils or markers. You certainly can go in and do that. But if you just want to use the stencils, which let's face it, is much easier than going in and adding color any other way, I would highly recommend making sure that you're putting down multiple colors, which each layer of stencil, to help you really build up that dimension. So the Gatefold cards, different for me? Yes. Fun? Absolutely. One of the reasons why I have stayed away, or I choose to stay away from like fun fold cards, is because the math is hard for me. Speaking of the fun fold, if that's all you're here for is just the easy way to get a symmetrical gatefold, you want to jump to like the 16-minute mark. But I have to make all of my things before I can make the card that it's going on to. So that's what you see me doing here. But so math, never been my strong suit. It's just not, I used to joke at work back in the day, because when I was dispatching, when I first started dispatching, we used to take like bonds and waivers and ticket payments and all that stuff. But when I had to do that, like I used to joke around with people like I can't do math, so I became a dispatcher. But we had like a little cheat book anyway. And then like with the bonds, they were almost always the same. I think a lot of people don't know that. Your courts typically have a bond schedule and that's what they have to follow. It's not just like arbitrary numbers that people make up. There's a bond schedule that's set by the court, and then that's how the bonds are determined. But anywho, so math has just never been my strong suit, even like graduating high school. Now, obviously I'm older than our current generation, but like I graduated with Algebra 1 out of high school. That's what I graduated with, Algebra 1. So when I was taking like my standardized tests and they were testing you on like geometry and stuff, like I ain't even never seen it. Nope. And in fact, I had to go to like special classes for people with the who couldn't pass their standardized test because you had to pass it in order to graduate. I don't know if that's still the case anymore. I don't agree with it. But that's a whole nother video topic, especially now that I have a school age child. Like I am not here for the standardized tests. But anyway, I had to take a special class in order to be able to pass mine. And I had 2 tries left before I graduated, and I passed it on the second to last time. But it's because I sat down with like this super intensive study group that was teaching me all the things specifically that were going to be on the test, because a lot of it I had just never seen before because I wasn't required to take it to graduate. Funny how that stuff works. But anyway. So for the greens, you saw me doing the exact same thing. I layered up 3 greens, and then now for the detail layer, for these, I'm going in and again, I'm going to be using 3 different greens, this time just slightly darker. So I started with what was previously my mid-tone, and then now my darkest color for my first layer has become my mid-tone, and then I'm going to go in with an even darker, I know that it looks weird that you would put like this royal blue over it, but trust me, because we're coloring, like we're layering the colors, the blue is just going to deepen up that green, and it's not going to look like blue. So this is the completed piece. I think these are so fun. For the second card, I'm using this Blooming Halo. And for this Gatefold card, it's going to be a 5.5 square card. There's so many different ways that you could do these, but these are just really easy maths ones, which I think is super fun. There was another video that Gina K did, which I thought was super cool, where she explained that you can do an offset gatefold and not do any math at all. So we'll talk about that a little bit more once we get to that area and it makes sense to watch it on screen. We'll talk about how you can easily get the offset gatefold without doing any math. But sometimes I think that the fun fold cards, because there is so many like measurements and things like that you have to take into account in order to get everything lined up, that sometimes it can turn crafters off to creating them. At least I know that's the case for me. And so I just wanted to show just a really easy, really simple math that we do, all the time as crafters with our measurements of our cards, and how you can just switch that up a little bit to make your gatefold work. My dad, I told you I was bad at math. My dad used to tease me all the time that he didn't think that I'd ever be able to read a ruler because I struggled with it so much as a kid. And now, obviously, as a card maker, like I do it every single day. That's, part of my process is, reading a ruler and trimming things and doing all of that. And so I guess it just goes to show you, it depends on what your motivation is, whether or not you can learn something, because I was not motivated to learn it in school. But once I wanted my cards to look a certain way, I certainly was motivated to be able to read my ruler, which then, of course, transferred to a couple years ago when my husband and I were doing the furniture refinishing, and we had to obviously measure things and everything else. Like, I was much more comfortable reading a tape measure and things like that, just because of the measuring that I do for my cards. So yeah, funny how those things just kind of, transcend different areas of your life. So here for the Blooming Halo, there's a couple of different layers, and you certainly can switch it up, but you guys know, if you watch my channel, this is not like new news. I like my photos to work well together, so I like my cards to be a pretty similar color scheme. So I did the one set of leaves a lighter green. I'm doing this set of leaves a slightly darker green, and then I will do the detail layer in more of a blue green, and that is basically how I, chose to keep all of the colors really similar, even though the images aren't. And you can use, like, just to be clear here, you can use any sort of dies for this, or if you want to stamp an image and fussy cut it out, that will also work. Like, you can put pretty much anything on the front of a gatefold card. It has to be a separate layer, unless you want to do partial die cutting. But even then you need the dies for it, so I would just say die cut it. But yeah, so there's that. At least if you want the image to be centered on your card, you kind of have to have a die. So here is that last layer, and this, again, I'm just doing a blue-green. It's putting some little, berries down, as well as adding the detail layer to that first set of leaves. And again, even though it's a blue-green, we're putting it down over a green, so it's just going to look like a deeper green. Speaking of color theory, after I knew I wanted to use the butterflies, I thought that they were beautiful. There's two different butterflies that I used, and there are tons of like layers, but I knew that I wanted to use them. Here is where I had a little bit of a struggle. So you can see the one on the right already has color down. Originally, I was just going to color them on the white cardstock, and I chose the blue greens because it was a color that I already was using in the bouquets, like to do more of a bluish green combination. And so I was originally doing the entire background, and it just was not. I was getting so frustrated because I could not get enough color down to make them like be saturated. And so I did decide that I was just going to cut them out. And then here I was like chasing them around and I was getting frustrated. And then I was like, why don't you just put them on your stamp wheel sticky mat? And that worked much better. Like it didn't work perfect. I still had to hold them partially, but it definitely wasn't like me chasing them around like I was before. So yeah, dude, definitely recommend the stamp wheel. And actually, I think that might be, I'm not 100% positive, but I know Picket Fence is having a sale, and part of the sale is their tools section, and I know that they carry this. So I don't know if this is on sale or not, but that might be worth checking out because I believe they sell the entire stamp wheel, but then they also just sell the sticky mat on its own, just like Altenew does, like they wholesale from them, which I love. I love companies supporting other companies. You know, I'm a big fan of that. Also why I put all the sales together to support those small companies. And then, for supporting my own channel. So it's like a very symbiotic relationship. Here, these are I think they're the Emperor butterflies. Really, really pretty. And these are actually designed by, speaking of companies working together, these are actually designed by Alex Siberia, which is a whole other company. And I don't know if she designed these before, like launching her own physical product. But I can't imagine. They just came out. They're new. So no. So like there you have again, more companies working together. Man, I love this. I mean, it's just so nice when everybody is like loving and supporting everybody because there is enough for everybody to not just survive, but to thrive. And, I don't know, it just makes my heart happy. But anyhow, so in doing this, I realized pretty quickly that I wasn't going to get the contrast that I wanted from the layers. It just wasn't, I couldn't get one dark enough. And I know it's because I'm using the blending brushes. I know that's what it is. It just puts down a lighter layer of ink, which does make them easier to blend. And they're a lot easier on these kind of intricate die cut pieces. But I was struggling getting enough color down. Also, the base layer is cut out of glitter cardstock. I don't even think I showed you that. And then for the little bodies, I opted to go with the teal. I used blue raspberry, but I think this one's Pool Party. But so here you can see they're the exact same color. And so I wanted a little bit more contrast. I decided to make the base layer of both the butterflies a little bit darker by using my markers. So I'm putting down a blue-green, which is basically the same color of the ink, and then my transition color, which is a relatively light blue, and then I'm going to bring in a slightly darker blue for the edge of the butterflies, and this is going to help create some contrast in my layers so that you can see each individual layer and it allows the butterflies to shine just a little bit more than if they're all the same color and just kind of very one note. Sometimes you just have to switch gears. I had no intention of using any markers. But I have them at my disposal, and if they'll work to fix my problem, then like I'm here for it. So now there you can see that contrast, which I was much happier with. Now let's start building these little guys together. So I have that white sparkle glitter paper as my base, and then I'm going to put on the darker layer. Just going to lay that right over top so you can see just a few of the areas. You can see that glitter paper, but then there's a whole outline to the butterfly that's glittered. And then I will put on the detail layer right over top of that. So we'll have like the white contrasting the dark, and then the lighter colors contrasting the dark. So it just makes the butterfly slightly more interesting to look at since we don't have that black outline because they are dyes. Love these butterflies. Big fan of butterflies. I just think they're like such a good neutral item for pretty much any card. So then once I have that built in, I just added a little bit of glue in the center, and now I'm going to add its little body, and then it's done. It's so cute. And then we'll move on to building the next one, just the same exact way. So yeah, I totally get that the math is challenging. That part's just not for me. And so I just use kind of the same measurements that I use every day in card making. So it isn't a challenging math problem. You know, it's numbers that we're pretty used to working with in the craft community. And yeah, I just find it much easier. So in doing so, I build my bases out of card stock, the same card stock. Now, some people like thicker, like 110 pound. I don't. I use 80 for everything, mostly because I'm cheap and I don't want to buy a different kind of paper. So you use whatever cardstock works for you. If you do feel like your card is, if you use 80 and you feel like your card is a little flimsy, you can always add like a secondary piece to the back panel. So now I'm going to go in. These are the matching die cuts for the stencils. I am going to die cut these out, and then we are going to get to the building. Now, all of my cardstock is 8.5 by 11. So for the A2 size, I already know I need my middle part to be 4.25. That's just the same as it would be for any other card. So it's going to be 4.25 by 5.5. So in order to make sure I have a piece long enough, I just have to double that measurement. So 4.25 plus 4.25, 8.5, which is the exact size of my cardstock. So I now have an 8.5 by a 5.5. In order for this to fold up and around, we have to split that 4.25 in half. So it's 2 1/8. 2 1/8 you want to score at on both sides of the paper. 2 1/8. Because when you add them together, 2 and 2 is 4, and 1/8 and 1/8 is 1/4. And then this way, you can double check it that both your score lines and the back panel piece is 4 1/4, which is an A2 size card. And then from there, you're just going to fold your top panels in. I like to kind of pre-fold them after the scoring and then go in with my bone folder. So for your base piece, double your middle section. And then for the fold, split your middle section in half. That's the easy math. So that's one piece. For this one, we're going to do a 5.5. So I have to add them together for my base piece, remember? So 5.5 plus 5.5 is 11. That's already as long as my sheet is. And then I need to trim it at 5.5 so that it's a perfect square. So once I have that trimmed down, I have an 11 by 5.5 inch sheet. And then in order to get the folds, we have to split that 5.5 in half, which is 2 3/4. Then we're going to score on both sides at 2 3/4. So remember, your base piece is the size of your inset, like your middle panel doubled. And then your folds are your base piece cut in half. Well, the number's cut in half. Don't cut your paper in half. Your card won't fold. So then I'm going to double check it. Everything's at 5.5. And I'm going to go in and do my folds, and they should meet perfectly in the middle to create this gatefold. That's the easiest way I can think to explain it. And this is one of the easier kind of fun fold cards that I've ever made, which is why I'm willing to make it. Because anything that starts to get more complicated than that, like, I'm out. So I did want to decorate the outside a little bit. So this is I think it's the garden trellis. And I wanted it to be white because I really wanted it to be super clean, but I also wanted it to be interesting. So, the struggle is real. So what I decided to do was I treated both sides of it's like just like the outside folds. I treated them both with my anti-static tool. I'm going to tape, Kelly, why can't I talk? I'm going to tape my stencils in place. And then I'm just going to pounce some Versamark ink right over top of this. And in order to keep it nice and subtle, but still somewhat interesting to look at, so it's not just like a plain, like, blah, white background, I'm going to use some clear sparkle embossing powder. So in the light, it definitely catches all that glitter. You still can see a little bit of the shine even when you're looking at it like head on. And then I am doing both sides of that. So for the first one, I'm not going to show you both of them. The first one, I switch it from side to side. For the second one, I actually kind of like slid it out and then slid the other piece back in. I would recommend just actually moving the stencil because I did have a little bit of smearing when I slid it out. Not that I'm overly concerned about that because it is such a subtle background. I don't think anybody would even notice. But this clear sparkle embossing powder, you guys probably seen me use it before, is just clear. So it's still going to be white. It's just going to put down like glittery leaves in the background. And then I will heat set that until it is nice and melted. You can see it a little bit better on camera, I think, once it is melted, but it's just a really subtle bit of texture and shine in the background that's not going to distract from our focal point, but is going to, you know, kind of zhuzh up our background piece. And then, like I said, I use the same stencil and the same technique for both of the panels, and I can do that because it's a large enough stencil to do that. So for the sentiments, if you're not familiar with this, I actually did a video on it. It's effortless artistry paper, and this is something Crafty Meraki does. They're pre-colored images. They match their stamped stencils, and then there's dies. But what they also have in it is sentiments, and it kept me from having to stamp my own sentiments. So I just cut them out of there. It worked. I was happy with it. In order to keep everything where I want it while I put this together, I did just put a little piece of temporary tape, just like low-tack tape, on the back of the flaps to keep them together so that I can see how everything will line up on the front. You do need to be aware that you're only gluing one side, because if you glue both sides, your card won't open. So I'm gluing the left-hand side, since typically that is how we open things. You know, like if you're opening a card that's, just a regular A2 size card, you would open it from right to left, like you would flip it to the left. So that is why I chose to do it that way. And then all of my other guys, like my butterfly and my sentiment, I am just gluing to this floral piece. I'm not even gluing it to the background. For the butterfly, on this card, I only actually glued half of him. I left his other half kind of bent up and sticking up. He'll still lay flat to go in an envelope, but then once he's opened, he'll stick up a little bit, and that's just a fun little thing. And then for the sentiment, I just glued that down. Here I'm going to go in and remove the tape so that you can see how it opens. Everything is adhered to the left-hand side, and then it opens up so you can put your message and stuff on the inside, and it's still, covered and private. For the 5.5 by 5.5, I am doing the same thing. So I'm only gluing the wreath to the left-hand side. And I am holding this again in place with just some low-tack tape. This is also how I took my pictures, by the way. Like if you're a card maker who does design team work, or you like sharing your stuff on, social media, in order to get a picture of it being flat, I did leave my tape in place for my photos, and that's just a good way to get everything to stay, closed for its photo op. For this one, I glued the butterfly to the left-hand side, and again, I just glued the base of his body. I did not glue his wings down, so that way when the card is opened, the butterfly does just pop up just a little bit. And then for the sentiment, I glued it to the right-hand side, but only to the wreath. Nothing should be adhered to the right-hand fold panel, or your card won't open. So then once that was done, I went in, because I got to add me some rhinestones just to make everything all pretty and sparkly. And I used they have, Crafty Meraki has two of my favorite rhinestones. The one that I used in this video is the Sparkle Magic Iris, but the other one that I love is the Sparkle Magic Crystal. So they're both kind of like a rainbowy rhinestone, but one is light and one is dark. And so that is what I use there with the assistance of my crystal katana, which I love for loose rhinestones and also small die cuts. Highly recommend that. Super handy tool. And then so I just put these in place, and then that is it. That is both cards. So I hope that you're inspired, even if you don't like math, to maybe try this kind of card. Again, don't forget that there's a ton of sales going on through July 4th. I will link that below. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I always appreciate your time, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.